Good morning. This is Dr. Hansa Das, and I welcome you to my channel History with Hansa. Today, we are going to begin with the lecture series on imperialism and colonialism with special reference to India, an introduction of which I had already given in my previous video. And as I had mentioned, we will be studying this particular topic, imperialism and colonialism with special reference to India, in a number of different videos. So, the first three videos will concentrate on the theories of imperialism, the different theories, the liberal theory, the Marxist theory, the neo-Marxist, and the neoliberal theory. Now, in today's lecture, we are going to talk about the liberal theory of imperialism. Now, as already stated, the liberal theories of imperialism basically began from the late 19th century, and until the mid 20th century, these theories were very popular. And we will talk about the main protagonists of these theories and what the main protagonists have to say about imperialism. So basically, there is a kind of a linkage between capitalism and imperialism which they are drawing, and we will look into the details of these theories. So the main protagonists are J.A. Hobson, Charles Conant, Thorstein Veblen, J. Schumpeter, and Max Weber. Now let us begin with the theories of imperialism. First of all, we will talk about J.A. Hobson. Now, J.A. Hobson was a British economist and sociologist, and his seminal work was named Imperialism, and it was in this book that he described his theory about imperialism. Now, J. Hobson basically links capitalism with imperialism, and he says that imperialism is not a choice but a necessity. Now, imperialists argue that there must be markets for growing manufactures, and there must be new outlets for the investment of surplus produce. And every capitalist economy has to expand because it is very essential for the sustenance, existence, and progress of the nation. And if a nation does not expand, or if particularly a capitalist nation, if it abandons its imperialist interests, then it will lose the means of acquiring raw materials and foodstuffs, which is very necessary for supporting its population. Because once a capitalist country expands, then it gets foreign markets for its manufactures and also gets cheap raw materials. So, in this way, Hobson has tried to link capitalism with imperialism, as he says that it is important for capitalist economies to expand. Now, Hobson, uh, while talking about imperialism as a choice and not as not a choice but a necessity, he takes the example of American imperialism. And Hobson says that American imperialism was the product of the pressure created, the economic pressure created by the capitalist economy, which forced it to look for foreign markets abroad. Now, J.A. Hobson is basically a non-Marxist who held an under-consumptionist view. Now, what do we understand by under-consumption? The under-consumptionist view is that uh, imperialism will not emerge, or imperialism will not develop, if whatever is produced in the country, or whatever is produced in the capitalist nation, is consumed at home itself. Now, this is possible only if the consumer's standard of consumption is high. If the consumer's standard of consumption is not high, then it will force the capitalist nation to look for foreign markets abroad, to so that the surplus produce it has is consumed. Okay, so in this way, Hobson is an underconsumptionist. I hope you have understood what underconsumption is about. So in this way, he's linking capitalism with imperialism. Now, he also says that uh, it is mostly in the capitalist nations that surplus production takes place, not much in the pre-capitalist nations. And therefore, imperialism is based on the foundations of capitalism, and imperialism is basically a method of securing economic gains outside the country. And therefore, capitalist economies must expand. So in this way, Hobson has linked capitalism with imperialism, and he says that since it is important for capitalist nations to find a foreign market for manufacturers and to find cheap raw materials, it is necessary to colonize and it is necessary to expand. So in this way, Hobson has linked capitalism with imperialism. Now we come to the next historian, or the next protagonist of the liberal school, which is Charles Conant. Now, Charles Conant had arguments similar to that of Hobson, and he has taken up the concept of oversaving in American economy. Now, Charles Conant describes oversaving as the crisis of economic production and the capitalist system, and it is from here that he develops the concept of informal empire. So, basically, Charles Conant also linking capitalism with imperialism. The next liberal historian, or the next protagonist of the liberal school of thought, is Thorstein Veblen. And Thorstein Veblen has a very specific view about imperialism. He says imperialism is an outlet for capitalism to avoid socialism. So once a country expands, once a capitalist country expands and colonizes other countries, spreads imperialism, spreads colonization to other countries, it also is aiming at avoiding socialism. Now, Thorstein Veblen has also talked about underconsumption, as Hobson has done, and Thorstein Veblen also talks about oversaving, as Charles Conant had done. So oversaving and underconsumption also figure in the concepts of Thorstein Veblen. Now we come to the next important protagonist of the liberal school of historians, which is J. Schumpeter. Now, the seminal work of J. Schumpeter was called The Sociology of Imperialism, and in The Sociology of Imperialism, J. Schumpeter has put forward his views. Now, very different from that of Hobson or Thorstein Veblen or Charles Conant, J. Schumpeter is against the idea that capitalism leads to imperialism. And he says this, he bases this argument on a number of grounds. So gradually we will look into each argument that J. Schumpeter makes. Now, J. Schumpeter, the first argument that J. Schumpeter makes is that a purely capitalist world does not offer fertile grounds for the development of imperialism. This is so because the people of a capitalist country are basically against imperialism, or what we could say, they are of an unwarlike disposition. So what happens is that uh, capitalism, by its very nature, is anti-imperialist, and J. Schumpeter has tried to establish the fact that there is no relationship between capitalism and imperialism, because since the people are of an unwarlike disposition, so they are against political dominance of any kind, they are against imperialism, and therefore no link can be drawn between capitalism and imperialism. Now, the second argument given by J. Schumpeter is that in areas where capitalism developed, these areas were marked by opposition to war, expansion, armaments, cabinet diplomacy, etc. That is, basically, they were against political dominance, or they were against imperialism. Now, this opposition first developed in England, according to Schumpeter, because England was the first country to industrialize and the first country to become capitalist. Now, this opposition, or what Schumpeter calls anti-imperialism, is it developed coincidentally with the development of capitalism in England. So this is a second argument. Now, the third argument that Schumpeter gives is that the capitalist age, that is the age in which capitalism developed, has also seen an opposition to war. It has also seen the prevention of war, and also the peaceful settlement of disputes among different nations. So how could we link in this manner capitalism with imperialism, when capitalism is by its very nature is opposed to imperialism? Another argument which Schumpeter gives is that the type of industrial worker, the type of industrial worker which is created by capitalism is basically anti-imperialist. Now, another important argument given by J. Schumpeter is that in a state of free trade, no class is actually wanting to expand, because what happens in a state of free trade is that the capitalist nation already has supplies of foodstuffs and raw materials with itself. So there is no need to expand, there is no need to colonize, and therefore to spread imperialism. So this is the concept of free trade, of which Schumpeter talks about, which develops in a capitalist system, and hence no need for colonizing, for gaining raw materials, or for selling its manufactures. And finally, J. Schumpeter says that imperialism is atavistic in nature, which means that it comes from the past rather than present relations of production. So wherever we find the traces of imperialism, they come from pre-capitalist forces. For example, the autocratic states, or for example, the absolutist monarchies of the 18th century, which developed prior to the industrial revolution, that is prior to the beginning of capitalism. So please note that industrial revolution begins in mid 18th century, and these absolutist monarchies belonged to a period prior to the 18th century. So since imperialism comes from the past relations of production, so there is no chance of capitalism giving away, or capitalism leading to imperialism in any manner. So J. Schumpeter is a very important historian of the liberal school of thought, and his ideas are entirely opposite to that of Hobson's. While Hobson says that capitalism is linked with imperialism and imperialism is based on the foundations of capitalism, J. Schumpeter is of the idea that no kind of a link can be drawn between capitalism and imperialism, and for this he has given several arguments which we have already discussed. Now the last one in the liberal school is Max Weber. Max Weber says that the capitalist nations, they basically expand because they have to establish their prestige in the world. They have to establish their prestige in relation to other countries. And he also says that international trade in goods does not necessarily imply imperialism, but he definitely talks about the concept of imperialist capitalism. So this is all about the liberal school of historians. Just to summarize what we have done in this video, we have taken up 5 protagonists and we have seen the arguments developed by each protagonist. J. Hobson says that capitalism is linked with imperialism. Imperialism is based on the foundations of capitalism, and in a similar manner, we find that J. Hobson is an under-consumptionist. Thorstein Veblen talks also about informal empires. Charles Conant talks about oversaving and underconsumption. J. Schumpeter, whose argument is different from that of Hobson, and he says that capitalism cannot be linked to imperialism. And finally, we have Max Weber, who talks of imperialist capitalism. So this is how the liberal school of historians has talked about imperialism by linking capitalism to imperialism, or by not linking actually capitalism with imperialism. Now in my next video we will focus upon the Marxist theories of imperialism, in which we will talk how Marx built up his theory and the subsequent protagonists how they put up their views. So this is all for this video. If you like the video, please share it and subscribe it also. If you have any questions, please write in the comment box. I will be very happy to take up your questions. Thank you very much.